this information one day before they actually announce it. Okay, or actually maybe the company has already disclosed it to the public just one day before the media has already disclosed to the public. Okay, and sometimes we also want to consider that one day after the breach announcement, just because sometimes the news comes up maybe late in the afternoon, say at 3 o'clock, but the market closed at 4. So the actual reaction we will expect, that will be the next day after the announcement. Okay, so we need to accumulate the stock price reaction across this period. That's one day before the announcement and the announcement date, and maybe one day after the announcement date. Okay, and this study, we only look at the 2-day window. That is the one day before that and the announcement date. Okay, and the result is similar for the 3-day window. That's including the one day after the announcement. Again, this is our model. Okay, and here the model we have an intercept, and here the D industry means that we set the dummy for the industry, because we suspect that the impact of this kind of information security incidents is more serious for, say, Amazon.com, Yahoo, or Google, right? Because they rely on this kind of information in online transactions. So we have a special industry group for those companies. And we also control for the size here. Okay, this is because if the firm is larger, the larger the firm might have more capability to endure the shock from these incidents, or they might be more capable of handling this kind of incidents. So we also control for the size. Okay, and this one, as we just mentioned, that the internal control report had 3 elements. One is called evaluation. That's this one, and also the management of internal controls and whether there's any change in internal control. Okay, so we actually code that whether there's any disclosures of this kind of information. Okay, and here the next part is the number of elements in internal controls. For example, there should be 3, right? That's the maximum. And we actually count for each of the breach companies, say that if the company only has the evaluation part, so the number of elements in internal control report should be 1. Okay, or the company has both of these 3 elements. And we also count the number of security risks. Okay, and how can we count it? Okay, we count it as the following. As you can see that this risk factors is about system interruption and the lack of integration and redundancy in their system. Okay, and that's the consequences. That's the sales effect. So we actually count this whole thing as 1 risk factor. Okay, so this is 1. That's the number of this information security risk factors disclosed, and this is 1. And if the companies has several, then we can just keep counting. And we also control for the total number of business risk factors. For example, we face severe competition. Someone is actually trying to merge our company, right? Or we might lose customers. Okay, so as you can see that here, the internal control report elements are not significant, but the impact of this number of security risk factors are negatively correlated with the cumulative abnormal return. Okay, that means that if the cumulative abnormal return has always, if it has negative impact, the reactions based on these disclosures can lower the prices of those impacts. Okay, or to lower the prices of the stock price reactions to the information incidents. And we also need to check if we take out the risk factors and see what we have. Again, the result is similar, so we can find out that there's no interaction effect between the internal control disclosure and the risk factor disclosures. Okay, and the result is similar here. We can find out that this one, okay, the number of security risk factors disclosed in financial reports is negatively correlated with stock price reactions. Okay, so that means this partially supports our hypothesis that as the number of the disclosures increases, the mitigation effect exists. Okay, and do you remember that we also want to look at whether this mitigation effect only exists when the disclosures matches the incidents, or whether it only exists when it's a first-time disclosures. Okay, so here we still have the dummy variable for the industry, and we have the size. Okay, and here we actually count whether there's the number of matched security disclosures. For example, a company might disclose 3 different risk factors. The first one is about virus, the second one is about denial of service attacks, and the third one is about the losing of confidential data. Okay, so if the company actually faces a virus attack, so we count 1 here. Okay, that's the number of matched information security risk factors. Okay, and we also consider that the level of match, or the frequency of the match, the percentage of this match. That means in the case I just mentioned that we have 1 match but 2 unmatched. Okay, so this case we have a 33% match. Okay, for this variable. Okay, and we'll also look at whether this is first-time disclosed information or it's repeated disclosed information. As you can see that, again, this kind of risk factors can mitigate the impact or lower the surprises of this incidents. Okay, and if it's matched, okay, it still can lower the impact of these incidents, and the magnitude is even larger than this one. Okay. Questions so far? Yes.
How do you isolate the impact of the reaction with respect to a specific incident that happened? Do you have any special procedure that you isolated to say this was specifically due to that aspect of that?
So you are asking how can we make sure that the stock price is specifically react to the incident?
How do you isolate the effect on the stock price? You say abnormal reaction. How do you isolate the specific, that it is specifically due to that fact?
Okay, so to the best of the things that we can do is that we try to tease out all possible confounding effect. Okay, for example, if there's an earnings announcement around that breach, we just get rid of that sample. Okay, or for example, there's a merger and acquisition, or there's a CEO change, CFO change, or there's any other possible reasons that might cause the stock price react to that information disclosure, we take out all the samples out from our sample. So that's the best we can do to make sure that the stock price reaction is slowly react to the information security incidents. Okay, any questions? No? Okay. So we found out that for hypothesis 1, it's only partially supported, and for hypothesis 2 and 3, here's what we found. We found out that if there's a match and if it's first-time disclosure, we can find out there's the disclosures of information security risk factors can lower the impact of information security incidents. But what are the elements within these disclosures that help investors understand it? Okay. So in order to answer these questions, as a first step, we just mentioned that we try to do the content analysis and try to extract the key phrases that within these disclosures. Okay, and we want to do the key phrases analysis as a first step. Then we try to look at upper level, that is, we want to look at the disclosure level. So we run the cluster analysis using text mining techniques. Then we have a classification model, and we try to classify whether this disclosure is from the breach firm or is from the non-breach firm. Okay, so the key phrases analysis, we have these key phrases that are extracted from our disclosures, starting from the breaking and denial of service attacks, or it's just a general breach statement. Okay, or maybe it's security transmission, system failure, interruption or disruption, or virus, worms, or unauthorized access. Okay, these are the key phrases that we extract from these risk factors. And we found out that the breaking, interestingly, is significantly and positively correlated with the cumulative abnormal return. So that means if the number of this breaking, this statement, or these phrases showed up in the disclosure, as the number goes up, that means you are telling the investors that we have a severe hole, or we have a breach, we have a weakness in our system. So that means it actually worsens the impact of these incidents. Okay, but for system failure, interruption, or disruption, as the number of this kind of statement increases,